you to Charo, thank you to Deepti, and I know all the other people that were working behind the scenes to help you. I'm sure it was a small crew, but dedicated. And so I am delighted to be here with you this morning. Well, this morning for me. I do know some folks around the world that are on the screen right now. For those of you that I don't know, I'm delighted to meet you. I'm going to tell you just a little bit about myself to give you a context and understand where I'm coming from. So I'm a learning and development specialist, a visual practitioner. I'm a former member, as is Tim Hammonds, of the International Forum of Visual Practitioners Board, so the board of directors, and remain a member. And I helped to, or really focused on the redesign of the Graphic Recording 101 program that is a signature piece of the IFVP. And so that was my real deep dive into graphic recording at the beginning, not just doing it, but learning more about it. And of course, as Charo has said, I am a US member of the Bicablo Certified Global Trainer team. So this morning, today, in the time that we have, we're going to do a deep dive into graphic recording. You will have time to get clear about where you are in your practice, no matter where that is. We'll dip a toe into, we'll explore a bit the breadth and the depth of the field. We'll listen to and learn from each other along the way, and we'll draw. You'll have an opportunity to share some of your dreams and your plans for your next step. I have dropped in the chat, and so I'm hoping you have access to it. If not, because perhaps you went off, now you're back on. But there is a file there that says GR for VisualBinge. It's a PDF, and if you click, you should be able to open it. It is a color version of what is behind me, which is essentially our agenda for working together. And if you happen to have a printer nearby, you might just even print it out, or you might be on your tablet also and be able to do some of your recording there. So this is an opportunity for you to do, let's say, I would call it more sketchnoting than graphically recording, and we'll talk about what that means in a minute. So that's where we are beginning. I will tell you that I am going to keep my eye every so often on the chat. And if you have a question, please put a question mark in front of whatever you're writing so I know to attend to that. And I'll certainly save the chat at the end of the session so I can follow up with people. So if you want me to get back to you, be sure to give me your email address also, okay? All right, so grab whatever you have at hand. So that could be markers and paper, it might be your tablet and your pencil or whatever device it is you're using. And we are going to talk about the difference. We're going to dive into this, and so I'm going to, maybe I'll just walk you through what the agenda is, just in case it's not easy for you to download what I have put in the chat. So you have a sense of how it's going, because I'm going to answer questions. If I see them come up and I know they're part of the agenda, I'm going to push forward to get us there, because we have a limited amount of time. And I have to try not to talk New York fast, but it could happen. So if I'm going too fast, you let me know, okay? But here's the agenda on the wall and what you might have up on your screen also. So you might be able to spotlight me or pin me to get a better look at what's back here, but we won't be doing too much back here. So we're going to do some introductions to begin with. I've told you a little bit about myself. I'd like to learn a little bit about you and where you are in your practice. We'll talk about finding your way. What does it mean to do sketchnoting or graphic recording? Where are you right now? Where do you want to go? And so those are the important pieces. So we'll talk about you finding your way. You'll start to imagine or dream, to use the language of appreciative inquiry, which I know a number of you are familiar with. You'll start to dream about what's next for you based on your passions, your gifts, and your ideas. And then we'll get into a bit of planning. I do have answers over here in this corner, although I will tell you, unlike most speakers, I don't do a Q&A at the end, because I believe the questioning is very organic in what we're talking about. And that's why I will keep an eye on the chat. I may not get to everything, but I will be sure to get back to you personally, or post the answers on Billboard also, because other people might have had the same questions and want answers too. So that is my plan for what we're doing together. So what I'd like you to do is take the next 4 minutes to think about these questions. And I will also drop them on in the chat after I say them to you. And they are, what do you appreciate? So I'll put it in I, so you're thinking of yourself. What do I appreciate about my graphic recording, note making, or drawing skills? And what are 2 hopes that I have for my time in this session? So I've just dropped those in the chat. I'm going to put the timer on for 4 minutes, knowing that that's a short amount of time. And you can use words and pictures, perhaps, to tell me what that answer is. And tell yourself, even more importantly than telling me.
What was the second part of that, please?
Okay, it's right in the chat, and it's what are 2 hopes that I have for my time in this session? You're a little more than halfway through your time. If you have a chance, please also put your answers in the chat, although I'll take just a minute or 2 in case anyone wants to very briefly show their work. Thanks, Tim. Okay, great. Thank you, Gary. I'm already formulating answers in my head and starting to think. Great, Deepti. You've got about another half minute or so. Once again, that's not to make you feel pressured, just to let you know, because you can always do more work on this. Clearly, my dog in the background, I don't know if you're hearing Gus, but he's objecting to the amount of time you have left. The best laid plans. Oh, Narayan, lovely. Sonia, that's a great place to begin. Terrific. And so that is our timer. You may have heard it also. And so I'm wondering if anyone would care to hold up what they have created. We really have, I'm going to keep this nice and tight. Thank you, Era, for holding it up. And perhaps we will even take a quick screenshot. Yeah, Kasi, and tell me if I am pronouncing your name incorrectly. I tend to do things phonetically. All right. Terrific. So I've just snapped a shot. Oh, Rocky. All right, we'll have to get you two. Okay, so hold on one sec. And so would anyone care to come off of mute for not even half a minute, just very briefly talk about what you created or what it felt like to do that?
Yeah, this is Kashi here. So definitely it is revealing. The good part here is that to answer your first question, at least I'm good at conceptualization. But to answer your second question, do I have what it required to be a graphic designer? That is the question that I have.
Okay, and so I'm going to be very precise in my language, which is part of what I do as an educator and a trainer, because that's in my background. And so this is not about graphic design. And it doesn't mean that having a graphic design background wouldn't be helpful. Absolutely would. But being a graphic recorder is very different. So we'll talk about that in just a couple minutes, Kasi. Thank you.
Sure.
Would anyone else care to join in?
So part of my hopes for this session, my name's Anu. Part of my hopes are to be able to learn some more tools and strategies and techniques to lead to better sketchnoting.
Okay.
I have been completely overawed by Tanmaya's sketch notes for several months now.
Okay. And Anu, I'm gonna stop you right there, just because we want to continue to move forward. You're welcome to put more in the chat. I will absolutely look at that when we are all done. In addition, I'm also going to ask that when people speak, when there are opportunities for folks to speak, that we look to someone new to share with us, to give everyone that opportunity. All right, terrific. Well, thank you for starting us off. And of course, I hope your drawings will make it to Billboard. We'll talk about that a little more as time goes on. All right, and so now we're going to get into talking about the difference between sketchnoting and graphic recording, because we're really here to talk about graphic recording, but I think we can't talk about one without the other. So I'm going to give you just a little bit of background from some sources. And my first source, and it's going to be about sketchnoting, and it's from Mike Rohde. So some of you may know this book and may know him. And he says that sketchnoting is listening, understanding what you've heard, translating into a visual language, recording in a well-structured manner. All right. Another definition I'm going to give you is about graphic recording. So the first was about sketchnoting, and this is from the Uzmo book, Thinking with Your Pen by Martin Hausman, one of the creators of Bicablo. And he says that graphic recording converts dialogue into text and pictures and then presents it to the audience. And so for me, that's the first difference between the two of them, that sketchnoting is for individuals, and we'll talk about that more, and graphic recording is for audiences. And then I'm going to tell you what I think about it just a bit, and that is that I help people better understand their ideas, questions, conversations, plans, and decisions by listening for the essence and drawing live using pictures and words. All right, so that's a thought, and I will show you, and I'm weightlifting here, and Tim knows all about this because he was one of the editors, and I was a behind-the-scenes editor for this book, which is The World of Visual Facilitation, that has all kinds of articles on a great variety of aspects of being a visual practitioner, which means that sketchnoting and graphic recording is one small part of that. All right, so that's a start, and I want to just tease out a few more of the differences, but we're going to start with similarities because that's more fun. Both of them, both sketchnoting and graphic recording, require handwriting that is legible to the users. So if it's sketchnoting and it's for you, your handwriting, that's okay. If it's graphic recording and it's for an audience, then your handwriting has to pass the legibility test, so to speak. And I say test in quotes, meaning that others need to be able to read it easily. In addition, you need to have selective listening skills, which many of us gain when we're in high school and when we're in college and in the work that we do, but we're listening for certain things. All right. And that means when we are sketchnoting or graphic recording, we're listening for keywords, we're listening for direct quotes, core messages, and also a third area would be choosing a layout strategy. And so there are all kinds of ideas around that in the resources that I've given you and many others. So let's talk a little bit about the differences between sketchnoting and graphic recording. Mike says it's not a question of objectivity and completeness, but what is important to the sketchnoter. So that means, how are you coming to the particular subject that you're sketchnoting? Because you have all this knowledge already. So you're just going to take down what's important to you, right? So those are good notes for you. Martin Hausman says the recording is less a reflection of the graphic recorder's own view, but of the dialogue as a whole, because we're sharing it with other people. And so we need to take into account, what do we know about this audience? What do they know? And how do we add to that? All right, so that's critically important. So those are some major pieces to be thinking about at the moment. In addition, let's talk a little bit more about another difference is, as a sketchnoter, you might have a repertoire of 3 different styles of lettering, perhaps a dozen or 2 dozen pictograms or icons, and a variety of containers, maybe half a dozen, and maybe some graphical elements like arrows, lines, dots, dashes, those kinds of things. As a graphic recorder, which is an entire process from my perspective, it's not just showing up with markers and paper or your tablet and a pencil. It's clarifying the assignment, preparing the content. What do you know about the content? What have you read about it? All right, connecting with the facilitator or the group if there's going to be one, right? Because as a graphic recorder, you're up at the wall or you're at a desk with your tablet, whatever it happens to be. But you need to connect with whoever is facilitating that event, and you need to get clear on what your role is. So I want to pause there for a minute because I've just given you a whole lot of information and I want to be sure that I've been clear. And so this is an opportunity to drop in the chat or to come off of mute and ask a question related to the similarities and differences between being a sketchnoter, which is really for you, and a graphic recorder that is really for others. All right, then either you're feeling clear about what has been presented and you have no questions, or you're still mulling it over, you're still thinking about it, and we'll talk about it. So what I'd like to do now is actually share my screen. And I'm thinking that that was one of those tech pieces that we were talking about earlier. And let's see, and I can do that. How perfect. I'm about to share with you a variety of graphic recordings. And I want you to be observant and start to put in the chat what you notice about these different graphic recordings. So this isn't about I like it or I don't like it. It's good or it's bad. I would have used a different color. It's what are you seeing about the layout, about the use of lettering, those kinds of things that we talked about, right? And the use of iconography. So I'm going to share my screen right now. I'm hoping that you are all seeing some examples. May I have a thumbs up from someone to make sure that that is the case?
Indeed.
Yes, we're good. Okay, because I have you all over at the side now. I have to scroll through everybody to see. Okay, great. So I'm going to share a couple of examples and I'm going to go in a little closer on all of them. And so these are, I won't say randomly picked examples, but they're definitely examples I thought would get the point across. So here's the first one that I created. I'm trying to keep the chat, but I'm going to put it away for the time being. Oops, hold on. Okay. I think that I just lost my, I lost my Miro board. Hold on one sec. We'll bring it back. So you got a quick look at what we were talking about. Let's pop it up there again. So start to think about what you want to be looking for when you're looking at these visuals. All right. So we're almost back there. Perfect. Got the board up again. Ah, the beauties of technology, right? You can make it all happen again if you need to. Here we go. Okay, so this time we'll be sure to click on the right thing, not the wrong thing. So here is a graphic recording that I did at a conference that was about appreciative inquiry. So just take a moment and start to think about what you're seeing. Perhaps the layout, the number of colors, the use of iconography, figures, and lettering. Let's shift, and these will all go up on Billboard, to another graphic recording. And this was done for the Mid-Atlantic Facilitators Network. And so as you can see this time, the title for the talk is in a completely different place, right? It's down in the bottom left corner, Roadmap for Free Large Group Interventions. All right, very different than the previous one. Here's one by a colleague of mine, Malgosia Kosteka. And also this is from her website, just so you get a sense, and you can note that if you want to, but of course we'll put it up on the site. So this is quite different. Here's one, I do some end of life work, meaning I scribe for people who are planning the ends of their lives and what they want them to look like.
Mm-hmm.
So once again, a different approach. We're going to scoot over, well, we'll scoot down here at the moment and we'll visit Sam Brad site. So BRADD, in case you're curious, don't go there now. But here's one of his recordings. Here is one by Kelvy Bird. Very different in so many respects. And then we'll just come back up here. And this was an end of life celebration that I recorded. And because it was during COVID, it was over Zoom. All right, I'm going to stop my share right now and come back to the group and open up the chat and see what kinds of questions you have. And once again, if the question is kind of complex and you feel you need to come off of mute to ask it, by all means do. Sometimes it can be tiresome to write too much in the chat. And so what are your thoughts? As you looked at those different graphic recordings, what did you notice? If you were going to start to make for yourself a top 10 list of these are the things that I want to pay attention to when I'm doing graphic recording, what would you say?
When you were talking about life, then it was like a very pastel color one and very soothing. That's what I noticed in the class.
Okay, great. Thanks. Yeah, now we can hear you a little better. All right. All right. So quick comment from Gary. I'm just going to look. Recording or sketchnoting creates stories or narratives that lead people through something instead of being disembodied notes. And so, Gary, I'm going to beg to differ with you there because I think in the sketchnoting that it makes a story for us, but it's just for us because that's who we have created it for. So unless you're talking, of course, about like Cornell note-taking or bullet points or something like that, in which case I'm in total agreement with you. Okay. Deepti, I hear you about drawing and writing big. My favorite thing, and I sort of grew up as a teenager working in quad-ruled notebooks, you know, the little tiny squares. And I tell you, I'm a really big writer, but I practiced a lot and I was able to go smaller. And I find also that's the help with a tablet is that you can write bigger and then make it smaller. So that's a sort of a technical piece to be thinking about.
Thank you.
Sure thing. All right, how to build the flow when recording. Yes, in part it's listening to when you're a graphic recorder or sketchnoting because you're listening to someone else. It's listening to your speaker, and I will be completely honest with you, not a surprising statement, that speakers are of varying quality. And some people have a really good flow and are very logical and easy to capture, and some are not. And so if you're a graphic recorder working, teaming up with someone else, you need to have their notes in advance so you know where they're going and what they're doing, and can also develop your own iconography, right? Have your symbols at the ready. Yes, absolutely. Okay, good noticing about what was done, about structure and hierarchy. Excellent. And so I'm wondering if any questions came up for anyone. I'm seeing lots of great comments here on what you've seen. Were there any questions as you looked at the possibilities?
So,
yeah,
if I may, Anu again.
Go ahead, Anu.
So the graphic recorder then, do they need to necessarily understand the subject if they're just looking for keywords and to just kind of getting the points across?
Oh yeah, and so it's always going to be my opinion. So we'll just say I believe for everything I'm about to say. The answer is yes. I mean, if it's rocket science and you're not a rocket scientist, you need to have enough of an understanding, and I'm drawing an extreme when I say that, but you need to have enough of an understanding to know what to capture, you know, what's important and what isn't. And how do things fit together and how do they flow? Because for me, when I'm graphically recording in the Vocablo method at any rate, which I often use, is very much like a mind map. We start in the middle and everything radiates around it. But what radiates around needs to fit together conceptually. And I would say one of my biggest concerns in looking at graphic recordings is whether there is a logic flow or not. Because there are many colleagues out there who are wonderful illustrators. And what I find is that they're gorgeous illustrations, and I don't understand where it begins, where the middle is, and where it ends. And I would say that training came to me from Christina Merkley, who is the second person that I started working with. The first was Nancy Margulies, a woman that was in the field long ago. And so I think that's a great question. And that's part of the reason you need somebody's notes and you need to have conversations with them. And so showing up at the last minute with paper and markers is not an ideal situation, and one that I try never to get myself into. So I want to just share that piece. Thanks for asking. Excellent. There's great stuff here happening in the chat. So I'm going to look at that some more later. Thank you, Tim, for adding your piece.
Jill, I have a question. So just what you said just now, that I was about to ask you the same thing, that is there any set pattern that where it should begin? Because most of the times when I see the graphic recordings, I get overwhelmed with a lot of graphics, a lot of text, and I really don't know where to start.
Sure.
Whether I should look from bottom up or top to bottom. Is there any rule, or you just get started?
I would. So are you talking about looking at it or creating it?
While creating, so that people understand that, okay, this is where it starts. And
so my first comment is there is not a rule. There is not one rule for how to do it. The graphic recorder should have a plan for how they're doing what they're doing. And it should become obvious to the people that are looking at it. So the question becomes, are you part of an audience, and the graphic recording is just for you, that audience? So you were in the room, you heard what went on. Or are you someone that wasn't there and you're looking at a recording that was done and you don't have that knowledge that other people have? The graphic recorder needs to know, what kind of situation am I walking into? Who is actually going to see all of this? And how will they come to it? With what knowledge base? So that's the first piece I would say. The second is that the logic needs to be clear no matter what format you use. You'll see by going on to the Graphic Facilitation Facebook page and also to many people's sites that some people do columns, and they do columns that kind of march across the page, and that's how you understand it. There are other people that start in the top left corner and work their way around. And that's pretty much me. No matter what I'm using, I generally, but not always, do that. I'm also sometimes driven by the content. I mean, you saw the one that had the blue background and the woman blowing air, right? So for me, I took this amazing big graphic and worked my design into that, but still had a logic in how I approached it. I worked from the left to the right side of the page. So Raki, that's a really complex question to answer. I'm glad that you asked it. And so sometimes I think we need to have other people look at our work also and see if they can understand it. And of course, knowing that either we know or we don't know what the material is actually about, right? A colleague of mine sent me her material and I wasn't in the room, so I could appreciate the layout and the use of color and the lettering and all of that. But I didn't know if it logically made sense because I wasn't there. Okay.
Thanks for answering, Jill. Thank you so much.
Of course, my pleasure. All right, I'm going to keep us moving forward at this point and ask you a question. And so whether you are just drawing a little bit, so as so many people do, and maybe this gets back to Gary's question towards the beginning, like people that think they can't draw, we can all draw, right? We're making marks all the time when we're doing handwriting, right? Whether it's printing or whether it's cursive. And a lot of us stopped drawing in grade school if we didn't continue on in art classes and that kind of thing, but we can make stick figures. And honestly, our brains are so complex, they're so good at recognizing things that we know a circle, 2 dots, and a U shape is a smiling face. right? So we don't have to be great. We can convey things very simply. And so that's a key piece. And that's partly how I handle it and ease people into it. So the question I'm about to ask is, no matter where you are in the spectrum, you've been doing it for decades, like Tim, all right? Or you're new to this and you haven't really started yet you do know how to make stick figures, and you've probably seen some work that you go, gosh, I could do that too. I can make boxes and I can make arrows and I can make suns and clouds and that kind of thing. So I'm going to ask you, I'm going to ask you a series of questions actually, and I'm going to put them in the chat also. And some of them are going to apply more than others. So I'm going to ask you to be gentle with yourself and do a little imagining. But here are the questions, and they are, if you're already doing some form of drawing, what do others most appreciate about your style? What are you doing, or what does it feel like to be effective, efficient, and competent, or moving in that direction? Okay, so let's not put it high up on a pedestal, right? We all have areas in which we do well. What does it feel like when you're comfortable and confident? What do you need to feel on top of your game, so to speak, or really good at what you're doing as a graphic recorder? And what would it mean to you to be well regarded by others, like recognized for the work that you do?
We
So
have
I want
to
to
draw.
Say it again.
We have to draw. We have to draw this.
You don't. You could just jot a couple notes. You could put it in the chat. What I'd like to do is just give you 3 or 4 minutes to think about it. You might even copy those questions into a document so that you have them for later. It's completely up to you. But I'm asking you to really define where you are right now and what feels good about it. So I'm going to stop talking for about 3 minutes. I'm going to put the timer on. And then I hope you'll also share your answers in the chat if it doesn't feel too personal. You have about 2 minutes left. I knew that's one of my favorite things. So you have a little more than half a minute, which doesn't mean you can't work on it more later, but if you want to add anything to the chat. Great, Tim. Does that be a fly on the wall, Tim? Absolutely. Oh, I read a Cuban proverb actually the other day. That's our timer. That said, the essence of it was, in our minds, there is a world. And it reminded me of what you're saying, Tim, which is about being a fly on the wall and being present and not bringing our biases, which we all do, right? We all have biases. We grow up with them. We're steeped in them. We can start to tackle some of them. But as a graphic recorder, it's not about what we think about a topic. It's also being careful not to get caught up in the power dynamics of what's going on in the room. It's about taking down what's there. Excellent. Okay, great. So be sure to take a look at the chat and what people are saying. And if anyone would like to come off of mute, because that's easier for you, and just share a little bit about either what you've answered or what it was like to think about those questions. I know some of you have been here all day, and so it's late in the day in terms of doing this kind of thinking, but I'm hoping that they're interesting questions for you to at least begin to think about. See, heads down. Can't even get people to stop playing with the fun tools. Do you have any thoughts to share? It's okay if the answer is no. Just want to give you time. Okay, so let's start with actually, I knew you had put a question in the chat about doing Zentangle because they're small repeated geometric shapes and your style is more abstract. There are all kinds of ways to learn to draw, and some of them are very simple, and I don't mean simplistic, and very developmental, and some are more abstract and global in nature. And so that's a reason to really, dare I say it, shop around when you're looking to do this kind of training, to find the one that's the fit for how you do your work and what you want to step into. I mean, my background is as an educator. I'm a curriculum developer. And so I think in logical blocks, although I'm a big picture thinker, I love to see everything at once, but I need everything to be developmental. And that's the reason, in part, I became a Vocablo trainer, because it is a very developmental approach. So that's my take on that.
What was that again? You just mentioned a name.
Yeah.
That's
and
where
so,
you became a what?
A Vocablo trainer. So that was one of the things that I mentioned earlier. And actually, Allie, my colleague, is here also. Hello, down in South America. And so we are part of the Vocablo Global Trainer team. And so I find it to be a very developmental approach, which is very helpful, I find, to many people, and I enjoy it myself. So I will take another look. How do we achieve that state of stepping back and only recording what is? I think it's doing some mental work first and really thinking about, what do I know about this topic? What do I think about it? What do I believe? Who's going to be in the room? What do I know about the power dynamics? And how will I represent on the wall what is being said? And I have to say, I have another book. Did I bring it downstairs? I did. Another colleague and friend of mine, Brandy Eggerbeck, has a book called The Graphic Facilitator's Guide. She has another book too. And she has some ideas about how to record what's going on in the room and what's being said. And actually, I disagree with some of them, but we're not going to talk about that here. The bottom line is, my suggestion is read widely about this, so that you can try out the ideas that are being presented to you, that you're digging up, and make your own decisions. And so part of it is just being constantly aware of, who am I in the room? What do I know? What am I bringing to this? And who are the other people? And how are we going to interface? How are we going to exchange? Great question. All right, I'm just taking another peek. Thanks, Allie, for putting in vocablo.com. Yeah. Terrific. All right. Any other thoughts or questions or comments about thinking for a short amount of time yet rather deeply, about where you are. Once again, is that easy? Is it challenging? Do you need more time? In which case you'll have the questions and you can do it later. All right, so I'm going to assume that you are feeling pretty comfortable with that. And just note for you that we've been on a journey so far together. And that is, we've been looking at what you're doing, how you're feeling, and thinking about being regarded by others, like within a field of work. All right. And so if looking at your strengths is something that's kind of new for you, I am a huge fan of the work of Dr. Martin Seligman, who developed, along with others, the Values and Actions, or VIA Character Strengths Survey. And so I am just going to drop the URL for that into the chat so that at another time you can take a look. It is a free assessment that will help you, by answering a series of questions for about 15 or 20 minutes, identify what your strengths are. And a large part of my work, in my coaching work, as I was listening to Tanmay, I was thinking, oh, how interesting, is that I ask people to identify their strengths. And we also know that our biggest strengths are our biggest challenges, right? And that's a whole other conversation about strengths, but it's great to know your strengths because you can think about how to leverage them every day in your work and in your play. And so if this kind of language or thinking about strengths is unfamiliar to you, by all means, go to the site, learn a bit about yourself. If it really turns you on and you're interested, I'd be happy to jump on Zoom with you for 10 or 15 minutes just to chat. If there were a number of people that wanted to do that, we could certainly do that. Or we know that there is going to be that opportunity, because the gift or the surprise that was part of my work here was to offer a group coaching session to those that are in this session, meaning those who have registered for the unconference. And so if you did the survey, meaning the VIA Character Survey, before we do that group coaching session, we could talk about it there. Right. And that would be super cool, because then we'd have a lot of people's results and we could talk about it. So you decide if you want to do that. It's just an idea. All right. And so we're going to move into our next area then and start to do a little dreaming. All right. We've been talking about where you are and understanding who you are, but I'm going to ask you to think about who you want to be, to jump ahead into the future, maybe 1 year or 5 years, and think about what you see. What are you doing with regard to graphic recording, right? So even if you've never done it before, we're talking a year out, a couple years out. So what would you be doing? And if you could have 3 wishes, and I'm going to drop all of these in the chat in a minute. If you could have 3 wishes, what would they be? And then just a little self-reflection. What do you notice about yourself when you dream of the future? And what would your mentor or coach, if you have one, wish for you in the future?
And so you are thinking, time check, 45 minutes are over.
Absolutely. And so we have, if I am not mistaken, another 25. Is that right? Excellent. Very good. We're on track. And so please take the next 6 minutes. I'll check in with you at 6. If you need 7 or 8, you can have it, but then you're going to go into trios and meet with other folks to talk about what you've created. And I'd ask you to draw this. And it doesn't matter whether it's stick figures or if it's, I don't know, just, I'm trying to think of all different kinds of artists here. Some famous artist. And a rendering. Actually, I saw a Maurice Sendak exhibit, if you know that kid's book. It may be too Anglo-centric, I'm not sure. And that was about monsters, actually. But it doesn't matter what your drawings look like, they're yours, and you're giving it your best shot, and that's what counts. So I'm going to set the timer for 6 minutes and ask you to draw and write your answers to those questions. And I will look in the chat to see if you have any questions along the way, if this seems unclear in any way or difficult. You can know my timer is about to go off. There we go. And I'm also going to share a few additional questions that you might want to copy and paste, or maybe you can see the chat when you're in your breakout rooms, or you might just want to talk about what you've drawn and written with your 2 partners. And so we have 9 minutes for this particular piece. And so each person should have 3 minutes to speak. Please keep an eye on the time so everybody gets a chance. And I'm going to leave it, I believe, in Charo's capable hands to set people into trios. And it might be a little different. No worries. We'll figure it out. Was our closing up?
Yes.
Terrific.
Yeah, people
There
are.
we go. Fantastic. And people are back. And so what I'd love to do is see in the chat, or for folks that want to literally chat, talk about it, come off of mute, what was that like for you to do that imagining into the future, to share that vision with someone else, and perhaps refine it a little bit? And all answers are acceptable. Fun, challenging, I didn't get done, I can't wait to do more. What do you think?
I have to do more.
Yay!
And I got some awesome feedback from Deepthi and Rakhi.
Excellent.
About what direction my career could go in 5 years.
Terrific. Great. What are some other thoughts and comments? Deepthi, you look like you have something to say.
I got some interesting ideas while talking to Anu and Rakhi. And then when I looked at Rakhi's visual, it sort of gave, stream into my thoughts as well. Yeah, I mean, very simplified, but really awesome visual, Rakhi.
Beautiful. Rakhi showing, well, how about we ask everybody to put up theirs and we could do a screenshot. So if anyone would, all of you that would care to add your drawings. Nice. Paper and markers. All right, so that's a good start. Of course, hopefully they will end up on Billboard also. Excellent. All right, well, those were big questions that you were asked. And so the next question is related, but a little bit smaller. And so that's in wrapping up, how will you apply your insights and what you've learned from this session to your own work and life?
Oh boy.
Right. Once again, a good question, and you have a couple minutes to start thinking about it or sharing your ideas. Oh, I did during when you were all busy, I went to my bookshelf because I know Gary asked one of the questions, and perhaps he'll see this on a recording and I can always post it. He had asked about templates for graphic recording. And so this is Martin's newest book that has an amazing array of ideas for templates and ones that you can really jump off from. Right? Get a sense of what they're about and then make them your own. So that was another thought. But getting back to, thanks, Allie. Getting back to the question, how will you apply what you've learned here this morning or this afternoon or this evening, wherever you happen to be? What are your thoughts?
I think Deepthi has given me some excellent advice on going ahead.
Okay. Terrific.
Yeah.
And what else? So perhaps it's advice. Rakhi, it looks like you have something to say.
Yeah. So drawing all these things and bringing all those answers, being inquisitive and inquiring, about all these questions that you've put for us. And while inquiring for these questions and finding answers and finding the right metaphors, it was such an eye-opener. And, looking in the future, 5 years ahead, and what are the things that are missing, which are lacking, which things that we want should be there, like opportunity, more time, and things like that. So all that inquiry and getting the right answers, that was such a great feeling. It's like I have a new direction now. So thanks to all you visual thinkers and facilitators, Tim, you, and everybody else who's been like presenting, Tanmay, and since afternoon, I've been like, I have been glued to my chair and I have not moved it for even a single minute. And I really found a direction. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.
Awesome. Beautiful.
I did not expect, the session to go this way. I thought it will be, we will be drawing and drawing and drawing. But actually, I love the twist you brought in by humble inquiry. I did not, expect it to be this. Thanks a lot for the surprise. And changing and challenging the way, we look at the visual thinking. Thank you.
Terrific.
Facilitation. Yeah, changing the way we look at facilitation for visual learning.
Excellent. Well, and I'm sure, Deepti, though, because I know you, that you were drawing throughout this, and that you were, since you weren't doing it for an audience, it was not graphic recording, you were doing it for yourself, though. And so it was sketchnoting, and you were practicing your visual thinking with the icons, with the figures, with the graphic elements, and adding the text and creating your journey along the way.
Yes, I was constantly thinking. Of course, I was constantly, all my, work-related problems were coming up, but which is good. I mean, that's good. They need to come out on surface. So yeah.
Terrific.
Yeah, I'll just build on that, DT. Thank you, Jill. I loved your approach of, sharing a bunch of different work at the beginning and, definitions around it, but then you then built it into just questions and coaching and future related questions, appreciative inquiry type of questions, which I appreciate that. And so I like that, lots of reflection that's very valuable, and maybe even in a bigger picture context. This is nice at the end, your session at the end, because it gives a chance for reflection for the whole day, sort of wrapped into it. I mean, you probably didn't really think about that, but that's something that I can see in the dynamic of your session. So, and the questions are very valuable, giving us time to reflect and go into breakout rooms, as opposed to just drawing all the time, which is kind of like what I did, I think. But yeah, so I'm learning also from you. I appreciate your approach.
Thanks. What a happy surprise that it's like the cherry on top of the ice cream sundae, right? It's the end that brings it together, hopefully, and gives you an opportunity to reflect.
Yeah, and I would probably learn and apply this when I do teaching. Is build more coaching questions into it. Is what I would add into future learning.
Terrific. Thank you. Well, I know we are right up against our time, and I want to respect everyone's time because I know you want to finish up on time. I am just going to drop in the chat a little information. So if you're curious about visualization work in Vocablo, you can always go to my site. And it's violi.net for end-of-life scribing collaboration. Some colleagues and I that are visual practitioners are doing end-of-life scribing. We actually have an open house this coming Wednesday. For those of you in India and that area of the world, it's going to be the middle of the night, but we're recording it. So if you sign up for it, I can get you one. So that's VEOLI.net. My apologies for the typo there. If you're curious about Zentangle, I'm doing a free program, a Creative Mornings field trip on Thursday. Once again, that's 8:30 in the morning in the United States. So it may work for some of you.
Where in the US?
New York.
8:30 in the morning, New York.